stretch your legs, or even catch up on a few emails. Next, I would like to introduce to you Jeff Salzgeber. He is a former CNN producer who won an Emmy Award for his role in managing the network's 9/11 coverage. He is Senior Media Relations Manager with the Sherry Matthews Group, and he is here today to give you a quick overview of media relations along with a few tips for giving a great interview. He will be followed by Charlie Dunn, who serves as the Senior Digital Strategist for Sherry Matthews Group. He will discuss how to effectively harness social media platforms to dissuade distracted driving and build audience share. Gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you, Michael. I just want to make sure, can everyone see my presentation right now? Not sure if it's actually showing. I would.
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. And Charlie and I have decided to split things up. So I'll be presenting initially on harnessing the power of media relations, and then Charlie will jump in after and do his presentation. So because we both have a lot to cover, I'm going to move pretty quickly through these slides. But I encourage any folks, if you have questions, there'll be a little time. I'm going to try to allot at the end of my presentation. And then similarly, we'll have a little more time at the end of Charlie's presentation. So our objectives today with my presentation is to help folks perhaps have a better understanding of the media environment, which has changed a good bit over the last 15, 20 years. Learn to develop messages in your own words to inform Texans, in this case about the dangers of distracted driving, and convey those messages through media interviews that are intentional, where we're there to give reporters what they need, certainly, but also it's all about delivering our messages and not simply just answering questions necessarily. And then we'll also, folks will learn how to control the interview process and get your message across in the best way possible. So today's agenda that I'll be discussing is an overview of the media landscape as it is now, which has changed a good bit, some interviewing 101. Then we'll talk about the importance of key messages. We'll discuss interview techniques, and then do some step-by-step interview. I'll share some tips. And at the end, we'll talk about the importance, especially if you're a new spokesperson or if you're not someone who does interviews all the time, the importance of practicing. We won't have time to practice today, but we'll discuss why it's so important. So for initially, we'll start off with discussing the current media landscape. And there you see some of our TxDOT PIOs giving interviews at one of our events. We exist right now in a 24-hour news cycle. Today's news media, they don't take a break or a vacation, especially with things like, websites, social media. News gets updated on an ongoing basis. And as a consequence, reporters and producers can often be rushed. The information, especially if it's a breaking news story, the initial information can sometimes be less accurate. And that's why it's so important that we exist as spokespeople. Journalists, as I kind of alluded to, you're really stretched much more thinly, if that's a phrase. Often a journalist will work on multiple stories at the same time in a given day. So a reporter might be working on a story for that evening. Let's say if it's a broadcast reporter, they might have a 5 p.m. deadline for a story, but they're also working on something that will air later on in the week. And so as a consequence of being essentially spread quite thinly at times, journalists, they want to be thorough, but they really need our help. So that's why I don't know if you folks have noticed, but when we send a press release out, often we'll see the verbiage that we have in our press release taken verbatim. And so that's why it's so important that good media relations are more important than ever. Journalists have also adapted to a remote working environment. So often we'll hear from reporters who are working from home or, what have you. Interviews have gone viral. Pardon me, they've certainly sometimes gone viral, but they've also gone virtual. So COVID has really accelerated non-traditional interview setups. So I think a lot of you listening, it's not infrequent to do interviews via Zoom. Zoom is really the platform that's used 90% of the time. We actually have some TV stations, they have Skype routed through their control room. So often we'll get requests for a spokesperson to do a Skype interview. journalists, including broadcast journalists, they're more willing to do those interviews via Zoom and other video conferencing platforms. And so it's important to understand the pros and cons of those. On one hand, you get to control the interview environment when it's a virtual interview. So you can decide what background you want to have, things like that. It's also important that you have to control the interview environment. Zoom, things like that can often accelerate. It can be very timely. Interviews often take 5 to 10 minutes. So you have to be conscious of that when you get a request, like, okay, so what's a good time in my day? And also, do I have all the information I need? Just because there is an immediacy to Zoom and things like that, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to do the interview right away if you don't have all your information or if you want some more time to prep. Next, we'll talk about just interviewing 101. This is a list of all the different kinds of things reporters want in a specific news story. They don't all have to exist in a story, but at least 3 or 4 of them should exist. And it's great to position yourself as spokesperson, as a resource for media. So that, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but things like images, visuals, if you have those handy, reporters really appreciate making those available, especially for television. It's a visual medium, but really even print, online. They love photos, renderings, things like that. Also, obviously, crash and injury statistics. So, to be able to come to an interview, have your talking points or whatever, to be able to say, drunk driving related deaths increased by 10% in 2022, which unfortunately they did. Or approximately 1 in every 6 crashes on Texas roadways was caused by a distracted driver in last year, which also is unfortunately true. Proximity, local is also very important. So if it's a news interview you're doing in Abilene, you'd want to have the stats I just mentioned. You'd want to also have some Abilene numbers to back those up. Let's talk about the roles in the room. There are different roles, your role versus the reporter's role. Unfortunately, or fortunately, they're not the same. So you as media spokesperson, you really have to position yourself as a resource. You've got to look at this as, it's not just a one and done where you do the interview. A few of us just do interviews for a living, right? So you're often doing the interview in tandem with any number of a dozen things in a given day. So sometimes I think we look at interviews as like, okay, I did that, I'm done. But I really encourage folks to look at an interview as an opportunity to really engage with this reporter, build a relationship. I always encourage, if it's an in-person interview, have your business cards with you and give 1 or 2 out. Encourage that reporter to get back in touch with you when or if he or she has a question about distracted driving or whatever else your organization may encompass or cover. As spokesperson, your role is to help the media listen, care, and get it right. As I kind of alluded to earlier, you're there, you should come with key messages. We usually encourage folks to have 3. You're leveraging the media as an amplifier to deliver those messages to their audience. So you're there to fill the role of the authority or the expert in the reporter's story. It's important to remember the reporter's role is that they will have multiple perspectives in a story. So if it's a controversial news piece, they might have someone with an opposing point of view. They would certainly want to speak with a victim or someone with a personal story like Jamie White. And if you're able to, it's always great to connect the reporter with other voices, other perspectives, unless it's an opposing one. But if you have a compelling personal story, a victim, someone who's tragically lost a family member, it's always great to, again, position yourself as a resource. Make that person's share that person's contact information, assuming that they're okay with that, which folks usually are. Reporter's role is also to determine what is and isn't news. So it might be that what the messages we want to convey, they might not agree, or they might not include all 3 if you have 3 key messages. The reporter's role is also increasingly to interest and engage their audiences with things like clickbait, with a subject line of a headline of a news story, whether it's online, in print, what have you, or even a graphic on local TV news, something that's really compelling that is going to get folks to click or listen or read further. Again, remember, you're there to deliver a message, not just answer questions. Yes, you want to have the reporter leave the interview feeling like you've gotten he or she what they need, but ultimately your role is to convey your 2 or 3 key messages that you want to be saying more than once. Drunk driving crashes are 100% preventable. That's a key message. And you should say them more than once in an interview because it increases the chances of that key message being actually included in the news story or piece. Interview expectations. This goes into what you can expect and then what you cannot expect the resulting interview to include or be. So certainly you can expect to help define the agenda of the interview, but also hopefully the story. You can expect to be allowed to ask questions. When is the story? When will this be running? What is the overall topic and what's your angle, Joe or Jane reporter? How long will this interview take? Also really important to know, is this a live interview or a taped interview? When I'm working with folks who are new spokespeople, but also frankly, a lot of us, a taped interview is, I always say that's the easiest, most comfortable setting because it's taped. It's not live. And so as a consequence, you can start again. If you flub your answer to a question, you can say, you know what, can we take that again from the top? And then you certainly also say to the reporter, you know what, I feel like my second take was the best on that question on injuries and deaths as a result of drunk driving in Texas. Can we go with my second take for that question? You can also expect to know whether or not you'll be quoted. So that's certainly something we can follow up. You can follow up, or ask your public affairs or PR representative to follow up with the reporter. And certainly you can also expect to know who will the interviewer be. You cannot expect, unfortunately, to know the questions in advance. We as PR and public affairs practitioners, on behalf of our clients, we certainly always ask, like, could we have the questions in advance? But some media outlets have policies whereby they don't share the interview questions in advance. In that case, we sometimes will suggest, like, well, with all due respect, here are 4 questions we'd really like to cover, if that's a possibility. And so that's another way around that, hopefully. You cannot expect to see the story in advance. We certainly ask and sometimes get, especially if it's a print or online story, we ask just get a draft of the story in advance, and in which case sometimes we can correct some inaccuracies if we see them. You cannot expect, if that's the case, you can't expect to necessarily change your quotes or edit the story, but certainly if there's an inaccuracy, we can request that. And you can't expect for your point of view in a story you were interviewed for necessarily to be the only one presented. Reporters are entitled to all of these things. Respect for deadlines is a really important one. So I always ask and encourage you folks as well, when you're asked to do an interview, whether you get a call or a text or an email, ask the first thing, ask what is the deadline? And again, based on that, look at your day, look at what's on the docket and see when you're available and do the interview when you're comfortable. So they might say at 10 a.m. you get an email or a call, we'd love to do an interview on this. You ask the deadline, they say it's 1 p.m. Okay, well, that gives you a lot of time to prep if you need to. So it might be that you do the interview at instead of 8:30 a.m. when they ask, or 8 a.m., do it at 10 or 11, whenever you're more comfortable. Reporters are entitled to concise answers to direct questions. That's why I think it's really important for folks to have practiced, develop key messages, have talking points you can consult, and practice saying things concisely, because that's certainly how TV news works, but even print. They want things to be really tight if possible. Reporters are also entitled to, as we all are, courtesy and respect, and they're entitled to redirect the interview to the subject under discussion. If you sort of wander off in or if you kind of go in a certain direction in your conversation, reporters certainly are entitled to redirect you. This lists all the different types of interviews, and I won't go into them all, but as you see, there are many different kinds of interviews. It can be in studio, where you're literally driving to the station and appearing on set. It can be via Zoom, which we're seeing a lot more. I would say in terms of the interviews we do for clients, gosh, we've gotten to where maybe in 90%, 80% of the interviews we do are now virtual. So over Zoom, every now and then over Skype, but mostly they're Zoom. And as you see, there are all many other kinds, and it can be a different kind of reporter too. I don't know if for distracted driving, if you get a business reporter per se, but you never know. So it's good to bear in mind who's doing the interviewing, what's the process, and what their angle might be. I alluded to this a couple times earlier about the importance of your messages being included in your answers. You want to provide journalists with the content they need for their stories, and you also want them to feel like they've had their question answered, but you also want to include your key message. Drunk driving crashes are 100% preventable. That's something you can easily work into any number of answers. So again, have those kinds of things at the ready. Introduce the reporter to, say, these sort of pre-developed mini stories during the interview that you've practiced and worked on, so that they can, you can kind of concisely, here's why it's important to give driving your full attention, and then go into some statistics, talk about perhaps there's a victim or someone with a compelling personal story that you want to allude to. That's the time to do it. And again, you want to influence readers and viewers about the positive role that your organization plays in the story. So distracted driving is, far too many Texans are being seriously injured or killed on Texas roadways. That's why TxDOT is launching its Talk Tex Crash campaign. And here are all the things we're doing. Here are the different components of our campaign. These are all the things that those key messages I just alluded to should be. Believable, retainable, relatable, understandable, jargon-free. It's easy, I think, sometimes for us in the traffic safety space to engage in jargon speak. It's really important to try to remove that from your key messages. Next, we're going to go into interview techniques, and these will help you time and again. Bridging, I like to call bridging essentially changing the subject. But you're changing the subject not just to anything. You're changing the subject essentially back to one of your key messages. So often, and I'm sure those of us in traffic safety, we see it regularly. You're there to do an interview on distracted driving, and someone might want to ask you about the new toll road that might have some controversy being built, or the new law Texas has just passed that went into effect September 1st, going after drunk drivers who kill parents of someone who's underage, having to pay child support. You may be there for one reason, and you get asked these questions that really aren't related to why you're there. And there's a nice way to pivot and essentially say, you know what, I'm happy to provide you with resources, or after this interview, I can get that information for you. I don't have that information handy, but actually what I'm really here to talk about is that distracted driving crashes are 100% preventable. And then you drill down from there. Bridging is important and matters because it steers reporters back to the topic at hand, keeps them from veering off. It moves reporters away from controversial, uncomfortable, or unflattering topics. And it brings them back to your messages. Best practices also for bridging include you answer the reporter's question, but you really your goal is to bridge from answer to message as quickly as possible, usually in less than 15 seconds. It's important not to, and this is really important, in your interview answers, especially if it's live, but also certainly also if it's taped, they're equally, don't repeat a negative. Isn't it true that distracted driving campaigns like yours that seek to reduce preventable deaths, they don't work, do they? If you start to answer or echo any of that in your answer, they have you on tape saying, well, actually, no, they don't not work, or however you want to answer it. They've got you on tape, or they've got you live saying that. It's sort of like Richard Nixon, I am not a crook. What's the first thing you think when he said that historic moment? You think, well, yes, you are. He said it, right? It's in his denial, he essentially said it. So here's some good bridging lines you can use. That's an interesting question, and I think I can best answer that by describing, and then you pivot to one of your key messages. What we hear most from first responders is such and such. Here's the real problem, and then you pivot to one of your key messages. Flagging is another wonderful technique. And essentially what it does is it signals to the reporter or audience that what you're about to say is the most important takeaway. It helps the reporter get it, essentially, and organizes their notes for them. It also suggests a headline and reemphasizes a key point. In a broadcast interview, especially live or tape, it signals to the audience to listen more actively to what you're about to say. It also you convey importance with your words and your tone and your body language. So you might lean in as you say something like, what's important to remember here? You see how I'm leaning in? Or if you have three things, you might say the three things that are critical to understanding this issue are, number one, bam, 2, 3. Or I like this one actually a lot. If you walk away from this conversation with nothing else, I hope you remember such and such. Again, these are all things that are just great ways for you to take charge of the interview. And again, it's so important to remember you're not a passive participant in a media interview. This is not just a conversation with the neighbor who invites you over for a glass of wine or coffee. This is, it's important you're there to really convey your key messages, because this is all about saving lives. Before your interview is scheduled, again, important to know whether it's a print or broadcast interview. Is this live or taped? What's the topic or the subject? Also, what's the perspective of the reporter? If it's KVUE, Erica Proffer is an investigative reporter and a long form, her pieces are a lot longer. She's going to do a very different story on distracted driving than a general assignment reporter for that same station who, they're the morning news reporter. So you're the expert for your agency, but there's also they're going to speak with a victim, if you like, or someone with a compelling personal story. It's not going to be a really where they're going to deep dive and question the numbers and data you provide. So it's important to know who's doing the interview. Have they covered distracted driving or other traffic safety issues before? How long will the interview be? Things like that. Also important, as I alluded to earlier, important to prepare and study your messaging. You should know your messaging like the back of your hand. And especially if you're new to doing interviews, or if it's a new campaign, I encourage folks to have a loved one, a family member, a friend, do mock interviews with you. It's a great way to kind of, and don't have them not tell you the questions in advance. That way you can anticipate. That way, some of the questions they give you, if they might be ones that you're more prepared to answer because your spouse or whomever already posed that question to you. Before an interview tied to that, anticipate negative spin or detracting points of view. So essentially anticipate that the reporter might not, they probably will be, but they might not be as friendly, or as they might have they might want to poke holes in your argument or some of your key messages. So be prepared for that, and be prepared with positive turnarounds, as we talked about with bridges, or bridges especially, ways to kind of change the subject essentially. And again, rehearse as much as possible. Have things on hand, especially if it's a taped interview or even live. You can have, I have here, you can have your notebook with your, in this case for this presentation, I just have some quick 1 or 2 lines just so I can consult if I get stuck, or if I need to, things I want to make sure I stress. So similar, I encourage folks to do that for interviews. Also, if you have a press kit, if you have your press release fact sheet, bring those with you. Obviously the reporter he or she will have gotten them electronically, but sometimes they really appreciate having a paper copy or print copy. Before a print interview, if it's a telephone interview, you can have your stuff right there, your talking points, your key statistics. Avoid reading a script. It's easy to just, especially if they can't see you, to just kind of read your key messages verbatim. I discourage that because it sounds stilted and not natural. Really before either interview or print, silence your cell phone, hold calls, and limit other distractions. Right before this presentation, my new puppy kept coming in and wanting to be part of this presentation, and I had to literally barricade myself in because she doesn't understand boundaries yet. We're working on that. For in-person interviews, kind of come and conduct yourself and carry yourself in a certain way that builds trust and respect. Be personable, but also kind of come in with an interview attitude, if you like. For broadcast, really important when you select what you're going to wear. A lot of us can, how many folks on occasion you have an event to go to and you have to kind of elevate a little, dress up a little bit. And I encourage folks for TV interviews. I'm in a shirt and tie today, but dress up or elevate a little bit. Solid colors are really good to wear. I'm in powder blue, which is always a great color. Avoid any kind of pattern, anything with an intricate pattern, because sometimes camera lenses can kind of wig out and not know what to focus on. And we want your clothing to not distract from your messaging and what you're there to convey. Avoid wearing patterns, as I said, also solid white and solid black. Usually white kind of bleeds on the camera and doesn't look as good. So, and similarly solid black. I encourage folks to wear pastels. Say yes to makeup, even for us gentlemen. Even if I did not wear any today, sorry to say, but some and just even some powder to help you be a little less shiny, really important. Clarify which camera you're talking to. Like imagine if I did this whole presentation looking over here, because there might be a camera over here. No, I'm looking into the camera here as much as I can so that it's much more engaging and you look much more competent, you know what you're talking about, you're looking in the right place. Test your technology, make sure you're properly mic'd, your sound levels work. In my case, I blurred my background because this is the same setup if I were doing a media interview. This is my office. I blurred the background before coming to meet with you all and present. Make sure you feel comfortable in your seat. You've got, a chair that doesn't swivel, make sure the height is appropriate, things like that. I alluded to testing your technology. Yeah, your whole background, this is your set. So you want to make sure that it's free from anything that's distracting. When I work with a client and we record a Zoom for any number of reasons, I'm always, I'm nice, but I always sort of say, that painting behind your head, it detracts from you. Or can you've got stuff on the desk that we can see in the shot. Can you either adjust the shot or kind of, I always say, clear the debris, things like that. So get as camera ready as you can. And again, anticipate and minimize outside noises and interruptions. Turn off close email, because obviously you have to have the sound up on your computer to do the interview, but you want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to interfere or detract from your interview. Take time to practice if you need to, if it might be a good idea. Free up any bandwidth on your computer. I always encourage folks, I have the premium version of Zoom, which it lets you, if you're the one booking the interview, it lets you have an extended window to do interviews, things like that. So that's all very important. Again, this is because you'll be doing so many interviews, likely via Zoom, things like that. I think it's just here to stay. Obviously, during the pandemic, and in the heart of the pandemic, the heat of the pandemic, this was a very necessary thing. But now the industry's changed, so interviews, by and large, are almost always done this way. Other things you might consider for Zoom, things like Zoom interviews, high-speed internet. I mentioned getting a premium subscription. I actually bought, but have yet to set up a ring light and things like that. But especially if you're going to do interviews a lot, it's really great to have that 3-point lighting. It can look really professional. Soundproofing, you can get baffles like in the old radio days as a way to buffer some of the sound, some of the distractions. On any number of days, I might have my lawn maintenance crew here with their leaf blowers, and it's anything you can do to soundproof your place where you'll be doing interviews you'll be doing yourself a lot of favors. During the interview, it's important to kind of hold an interview attitude from the moment you enter the studio to the moment you leave. Stay poised and on message. It's easy, whether it's a print interview, broadcast. I think it's easy for folks to talk a little too fast, too quickly. So just be aware of that. If you don't know an answer, say, unfortunately, I don't have that information handy. I'm happy to get it to you, and I can certainly follow up with you. And then pivot back to your messaging. Don't speculate. That's a no-no, absolutely. And try to limit your answers to no more than 25 seconds. And also listen to the full question a reporter may ask, and then pause before you answer, because that pause so important, because it gives you that moment, especially if it's a taped interview. They might finish asking the question, and it might be, 10 seconds before you answer, if you need to kind of, okay, how do I want to say this? And it really can make all the difference. During the interview, also important to frame your responses around solutions. Avoid any kind of negative positioning. Don't be afraid of engaging the reporter if they get something wrong and correcting it the moment it happens. Recognize and respond to interview styles. If it's a taped broadcast interview, this is really important. Repeat the reporter's questions in your answers, so they get complete sound bites that they have a beginning, middle, and end that they can use, because the question won't be used in the final product. So in other words, if a reporter says to you in a taped interview, what color is the sky? Well, if you only answer blue, guess what they have on tape? Your soundbite is just you saying blue. And that's not going to give them what they need. Can be used in other ways. So I would, if you're asked what color is the sky and it's a taped interview, the sky is blue. And you might expound on that. The sky is blue because the atmosphere and blah, blah, blah. And that way they've got a complete beginning, middle, and end soundbite that they can use for their story. Take the final softball question. How many times when we're interviewed, you'll be asked, do you have anything else you want to add? And all too often folks say, no, I'm good. Because you have other things to do. You want to kind of move on, but really, the final softball question, and do you have anything to add? That's another great opportunity for you to pivot back to one of your key messages. Even if you've said it like 3 times already and you feel like it's redundant, you can say, you know what? I just really I thank you for that opportunity. I do have something I'd like to add. Drunk driving related crashes increased by 10% in 2022. Approximately 1 out of every 6 crashes on Texas roadways was caused by a distracted driver. And distracted driving related crashes are 100% preventable. It's so important that your viewers know that. See? So then once again, and I kind of combined 2 or 3 key messages in one final answer, just because I in that case, I would have taken the softball question. And again, I said this earlier, repeat your key messages as often as possible. During the interview, don't fill silences. Sometimes a reporter, especially with a more controversial topic, might ask you a question that's uncomfortable, and they kind of want to watch you squirm. So they might, whatever they ask, they just kind of, they just let this, or pardon me, you answer their question as best you can without repeating negatives, things like that. But then they just kind of sit there and look at you, because they're wanting you to get nervous and say something that you're not supposed to say, essentially something that's off the record or something that is not part of what we want to convey, not one of our key messages. It might even be something very controversial. And it's easy to start to get nervous, but just be comfortable with uncomfortable silences as much as you can. Don't argue or debate. Don't tell jokes. I'm a big jokester, and I love that in my personal life, but for any kind of an interview I might be doing or consulting with someone on how they do, it's all no joking, because it's easy to get misunderstood, or for your topic perhaps to be taken less seriously because you're taking yourself less seriously. During the interview, do not embrace the hypothetical or speculate. I alluded to this earlier. Don't repeat negatives. Somebody says, these traffic safety campaigns, they really don't work. Don't repeat any part of that, because then they have you on camera saying that, on tape saying that. Don't fidget if it's a broadcast interview, because that makes you look a little shifty. And don't forget to deliver your key messages. Again, one other thing I want to mention, don't use as much as you can avoid using acronyms, jargon, meaningless statistics. it's just confusing. To always remember who your audience is. If you're wanting to convey, in this case, the importance of not texting and driving, not having any distractions, well, you want to have simple language that the average Joe or Jane at home can understand and engage with and follow. And again, with interviews, being human beats being perfect. So we all have, at the end of an interview, often folks will experience what I call interview remorse, where you're like, oh, why didn't I say that thing that I wanted to convey? So it's important to watch your interviews. If it's live, make sure you or a loved one tape the morning news segment or what have you. But it's also important to watch, see what you can do better next time, and be honest with yourself. Maybe have someone you trust will convey the information in a kind way. Ask them for their input. But being human, again, that means don't read from your talking points or don't read your key messages verbatim, because that makes you sound like a robot and not as natural. So being human and conveying what you need to convey in your own words with a few key messages that you've kind of memorized to the point that it's like a second nature to you. That's so much more important than getting everything exactly right. So just be forgiving with yourself, especially if you're new to doing interviews. After the interview, and this again goes to being a resource for the reporter, quickly follow up with any information that you promised to circle back on or back with, or if there's new information that would be relevant to their story, by all means follow up with the call. Or I text certain reporters. I have texting relationships with any number of reporters, so that's often how I'll engage. Or I'll say, check your email. I just sent you new information, at 11:05 a.m. After the interview, let your media team know immediately if you may have misspoken or feel like there's a major point you forgot to include. There's never anything wrong with following up with more information or certainly correcting something that you might have gotten wrong. I alluded to that you'll likely have a little bit of interview remorse. It's important to learn from your mistakes, make notes for next time. Right after the interview, it's usually good too to make those notes while it's still fresh in your mind. Watch your news piece or the story you were interviewed in or segment you appeared in and ask yourself, did my key messages come through? And then again, really important to practice, especially if it's a new campaign or if this is one of your first, if you're newer to acting as a spokesperson, practicing with a loved one. The more you do it, the more, as I say, your key messages should be, like second nature to you, like something you can just say, and it just doesn't even, you're not even reciting it at that point. They're just on the tip of your tongue and they just roll off your tongue. That's really how to be best prepared for an interview. And now with that, if anyone has any questions, we have about 7 minutes. I went faster than I thought. So by all means, if there are any questions, now's the time.
Jeff, we did have a couple of questions. One person, Nicole Tyler, asked if you could provide an example of jargon speech.
Sure. This actually is not a transportation related one, but our agency, Sherry Matthews Group, we have a variety of statewide state government agencies we work with. So for the Texas WIC program, which is under the Department of State Health Services, we just did a breastfeeding awareness campaign for August, which is National Breastfeeding Month. And initially in some of our practice interviews, one of our bigwig spokespeople would use language like, he would talk about someone as a lactation consultant, which that's what they say internally. And a lot of folks might know what that is, but it's essentially a breastfeeding expert. So that's an example of jargon. So, or this same bigwig with the organization would say the populations we serve instead of saying WIC families, the families we work with. So things like that.
Okay. A couple of people have asked if we can make your slides available. If you don't have an issue with that, we can add that to people's e-bags.
Absolutely.
Okay. So everyone, you do have out in the main lobby, there's a tab for an e-bag where we're going to add resources, and we will add that resource to the list. If you have other questions, please type them in the Q&A tab that's right next to the chat tab, or you can put it in the public chat, and I'll move it over there if you're having trouble finding that.
I just remembered and this is why it's important. Yeah, this is a real-time example of something I forgot to say. It wasn't an interview per se, but a presentation. I always encourage folks, if you yourself are bilingual in Texas, the huge Hispanic population. So especially if you do an interview or you get a request, say in El Paso or Laredo or the Valley, but I would really do it in any, because like KI in Austin, one of the stations also they also do interviews and provide content to Telemundo. So I always encourage folks, if you're a Spanish speaker, offer that up. I can do the interview a second time in Spanish if that's something that would be desired. And it's another way to get your message to a whole other audience that and the reporter or producer might not have thought of that. But we do that a lot. Spanish language media in Texas they're such a great partner to us on so many of our campaigns. And so that's important not to forget.
It also looks like it's important to have some water available while you're
Thank
doing
you.
interviews. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we can move on to Charlie. Michael, did you want to introduce Charlie, or did you do that at the beginning? I'm lost track.
I think I got introduced. If for those wondering, I'll let Michael take the stage.
Yeah, no, I did introduce Charlie already.
But as I get my slides up on the screen, I'll kind of I'm Charlie Dunn. I'm a senior social media strategist at Sherry Matthews Group. So same agency as Jeff, but kind of the other side of the media verse here. It's always great. Jeff, thanks for giving such a great presentation. It's always great to have kind of a brush up on how to present right before you present. So now I'm thinking about, like, do I need to change this patterned shirt? Yeah, so Jeff kind of spoke to the news media portion of this presentation, and I'm going to talk about how you harness social media, or as I like to call this presentation, how to become a social media superstar. So to start off, I thought we'd make things a little interactive, since that's what social media is all about. And I have a poll for you. You should see it. There's a poll tab on the right where you're doing some of the Q&A stuff. But I just wanted to get a sense of what social platforms you currently use. And you can select as many as you want. So if you're using Facebook and Instagram, let me know. Maybe just a Snapchat purist. But go ahead and go in there and vote on what you're using, and we'll kind of get a pulse on what people are interested in here in the room. And I've done this before, actually, and I can see the results coming in live. I'm always tempted to call it like a horse race or something. Like Facebook's taking the lead and Instagram coming up from behind. All right, we have 52 responses here. I think if I close the poll, y'all can see it. But before I do that, just in case it vanishes, our results are Facebook is the leader, no surprise, closely followed by Instagram. Facebook's at 30%, Instagram's at 24%. Then LinkedIn, there's been a last minute move to Facebook, it's taken a commanding lead. But then it's LinkedIn, then Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and then there are three of you that I'm proud to see are already on Threads. All right, let's close this poll. Cool. All right, so I may have said some names of platforms that you may be scratching your head at there. So just to level set here, I'm going to kind of give a quick overview of each of the platforms and kind of what each is good at. So Facebook is kind of the mainstay of social media. It's one of the original platforms. It's the biggest, it's the most used here in this room. And it's a great place to connect with friends and family. You also may be familiar with the Pages function that you're using as kind of your brand ambassador on Facebook. And again, that's where you're trying to make connections with people. Another way that Facebook has been promoting is actually forming groups on Facebook so that you can kind of collect those smaller groups of people with like interests, where you can have a little bit more of a community and a conversation rather than a page that kind of represents the brand giving out information, but not necessarily that two-way communication. Twitter, or as it's now known, X, is great. It's a very fast-paced social network. It's great for things like news, following live events. It's even great if you want to try and connect with influential people that are kind of within your area of interest. But it's mostly kind of like what Jeff was speaking on. It really syncs up with a lot of those topics. Any sort of breaking news is really going to be covered on this platform. LinkedIn is kind of the business version of Facebook. It's, instead of connecting with family and friends, you're going to work on connecting with your coworkers or other business professionals that fall within your industry. So a great way to kind of network. And then Instagram, probably the most popular right now of the big social networks. It started out as a quick way to share pictures and video online, but it's kind of evolved over the years, and they've added more features. Stories is something that they've added in the last few years or so that is a way to kind of less formally share information. A story is only up for 24 hours. So you can kind of show maybe behind the scenes content, or you just need to get a message out quickly. It's also great if you're posting in your feed to put that in the story, because a lot of people only use stories on Instagram now. And then you see them adopt new features. They have a new Reels feature that is been created to try and compete with a platform you may recognize on this next slide. So these are the ones that are kind of upcoming, or maybe a little bit surprised. They were definitely in our poll the ones that are the least used right now, but that could be changing soon. So the social platform I was alluding to, of course, is TikTok. It's very popular among Gen Z teenagers. If you haven't been swept up in the TikTok mania, it's a place to share short form videos. Generally, they're under about a minute, 15 seconds to a minute. They did recently increase capacity to 10 minutes. So, there are some longer form videos on there. But you'll see a lot of dance trends on there. You'll see comedy, some skits that people are doing. There's even a lot of education. People kind of almost teaching you about certain subjects found on TikTok. And while you may or may not use TikTok, it is having a profound effect on how the other social channels are growing and kind of influencing the content found on those channels. Despite, if you're not on TikTok, you're probably going to see TikTok content on a lot of those channels that I just covered. People repost those on their Twitter. Instagram's Reels function is often joked about just being kind of the most popular TikToks being reposted. So everyone's kind of chasing where TikTok's going right now. The other one up here that kind of used to be the hot social network is Snapchat. And you may think that it kind of had its time in the sun and has faded away, but it actually has a pretty loyal following, especially among the teen audience. It's also kind of maturing. A lot of people that are not teenagers are using Snapchat right now, but surprisingly, it's had some staying power. It may not be the most talked about network right now, but it still comes up with great ideas. I mentioned the stories on Instagram that was directly lifted from Snapchat. So maybe a platform to pay attention to. And then the final one on here is Threads. Threads is the newest addition to these slides. It launched, I guess, about a month ago, and is Meta, the parent company of Facebook's attempt at kind of taking on Twitter or X. So it's surprisingly similar. It's a text-based news feed. It's similarly fast-paced, and includes most of the same features. They keep adding new things since it's pretty new, but it's essentially a Twitter clone. And the reason to keep an eye on this is while it is by far the smallest social network of the ones I just talked about, it is quickly growing, and with the backing of such a big, prolific company like Meta, it may you may see it kind of get bumped up in importance as it attempts to usurp Twitter. So while we're covering all the basics on social media, I asked the question, what are hashtags good for? You see these all the time. You'll see them on water bottles or on the side of the court at basketball games. So why hashtags? Hashtags are very popular on Twitter and Instagram. They're also used on TikTok to a certain extent. But the main intention is to group similar conversations. If you look closely in the example that I have here, this woman is standing in front of her Jeep, and she is on a road trip. And so she's kind of part of this Jeep community where they mod their Jeeps. And so she has a lot of Jeep related hashtags. She's got hashtag Jeep Girl, Jeep People, overlaying Jeep. And then in addition to that, she has more broad hashtags like hashtag road trip or hashtag summer, kind of things that are a little bit outside that niche, but still relate to her content. And so this is a great way to insert herself into the more niche Jeep conversation there on Instagram. But, and this is especially true of Instagram, she's using these hashtags very tactically to try and increase her reach. By using broader hashtags or very popular hashtags, you're actually able to boost the amount of people that might see your content. I've pulled a couple of popular ones here that relate to driving or cars, knowing that a lot of our mission is to stop distracted driving. And so using some of these hashtags in your post, in addition to the more on-topic hashtags like a campaign hashtag or something that's maybe local in relevance, these bigger hashtags will kind of insert you into these massive conversations happening on the social platform as well, and will probably increase the number of eyeballs that are looking at that post. I also wanted to point out this kind of technique. It's a little hard since I magnified her hashtags here, but she's actually included these hashtags in the caption. So it's caption and then kind of a bunch of dots and then the hashtags. And I'll share some tools later in the presentation that'll kind of help you generate a similar approach and kind of hide them so that you get the benefits, but you're not just putting a bunch of hashtags in your caption, which may or may not look ugly. So if you're successful in sharing all this content, hopefully your post goes viral or it's shared everywhere. And I bring this up just to kind of distinguish between going viral and what a meme is, but also to bring up the importance of using something like a meme in your content creation. So going viral is great. You created a piece of content and now it's being shared everywhere. A meme, on the other hand, is something that's a little bit more adaptable and can be made your own. I have an example here of the line from Lord of the Rings where one does not simply walk into Mordor. And then people have taken that and they've changed it into something, making fun of cooking or the referencing the Walk 500 Miles song. And a lot of times when you're creating content on social media, you're throwing a lot of stuff out there, you're seeing what sticks, you're trying to capitalize on trends. And this is a great way to kind of find what's popular, capitalize on a trend, but make it your own and still convey your message. Kind of find the way that your message fits into that content, but still use kind of the language of social media to get that out there, rather than just a straight approach of offering a statistic or some content like that. So a lot of information. How do you manage it all? How do you decide what to post, when to post, things like that? So just a quick run through of the do's and don'ts of social media. First, you want to be true to your authentic self. On this last slide, I'm talking about memes and how those are a fun way to kind of communicate with your audience. But, that may not be the style of the account you're running or your personal account. And so that may not be an approach you take. You kind of want to center on what it is that you want to communicate, understand how you want to be portrayed online. And some of these more silly techniques, while fun and they get attention, may just not be the approach. You also want to be respectful to differing opinions. If you read something you disagree with, is it really worth engaging in that public dialogue? And we'll talk a little bit more in a couple of slides about kind of how to judge that. But it's good to remember that anything you post on social media is out there. It's a public forum where pretty much anyone can read anything. So if you're having a heated argument, or even trying to quell an angry person online, it's all there. And as the interaction grows, it usually becomes a little bit more popular and easier for people to find. Let your voice be heard. Share what you're passionate about. I think there's always the hesitation of maybe posting too much or too little, but really just getting out there on social media and testing things out. Everything has a pretty quick shelf life on social media. Things are moving very rapidly, and a lot of times you'll find that things just float on by. It may be popular today, but by tomorrow, nobody's thinking about it. So it kind of gives you a forum to interact and try things out. So those things that you're passionate about, try different ways to communicate those. In terms of the don'ts, you don't want to engage with trolls. And again, we'll get into that in a couple of slides. Someone who's overly negative, it's probably not a great place to kind of have it out with them. Of course, you don't want to post any abusive content or anything that may be viewed as profanity. Again, that kind of differs depending on who you are on social media, whether you're on your personal account, a page representing your brand, or any other variations of that. You also, of course, don't want to spread misinformation. We've all seen how that can go wildly out of control, and all of a sudden we think they're sharks swimming on the highways during a flood or something. So don't give a voice to that. Continuing on that theme just a little bit, social media etiquette. I kind of referenced this, but if your company or brand that you're representing online has any sort of guidelines to their communication, you want to make sure that you follow those online to preserve their reputation. And I've listed a few questions you might ask yourself before you post anything. Is this appropriate to share on social media? Am I choosing the correct social medium? So kind of like we ran through, a meme that you made might be great for Twitter, but it might be a little less appropriate for your Facebook page, where you maybe have an older crowd that follows your page. So kind of think about who's following you on each medium and who's on each medium. We talked about how TikTok is very Gen Z focused, and so they're going to be a little bit more receptive to a certain type of content than someone who's maybe on Facebook or Instagram and has a little bit more of maybe a serious attitude, expects a little bit more quality in their posts. Will anyone care about this content besides me? So kind of think, is this relevant to your audience again? Will I offend anybody? If so, who? Sometimes you can't help but offend someone online. People are looking for things to get upset about. But you do want to try to minimize that. And then finally, do I really want to share this? Again, once you post, it's out there. Maybe it's something you want to keep private, or it's just not something that's appropriate for social media. So I've alluded this the last two slides. What do you do when somebody is either in the comments or posting in your group or tagging you in a tweet, just kind of saying harmful things, saying negative things, maybe saying untruthful things? How do you handle that? So we like to use this diagram that provides a kind of a nice flow of questions you can ask yourself to figure out how exactly you should respond to that. So to start off, you ask yourself, is the posting positive or balanced? If yes, you may want to like the post, favorite the post. If they certainly if they agree with you, you want to give some sort of nod to the fact that you support that. So liking, commenting, even just a quick comment with a thumbs up emoji or a heart, depending on what they say, or the praise hands, if you really agree with it, can go a long way to kind of building that audience loyalty. If it's something you don't agree with, that's maybe you kind of repost and correct the fact. But we'll kind of get into the negative side of things on this other kind of main lane here. So the first thing is, are they a troll? So are they posting? Are they mostly just bashing or degrading the brand or others related to the brand? This is not too dissimilar from the rager, who may be somebody who's just ranting, raging. They may be joking, but like kind of in a cruel fashion. It could be satirical in nature, but they may have gone too far with that. Both of these types, you really want to kind of monitor those. Engaging with these a lot of times is like throwing fuel on the fire. They're kind of looking for a fight, and by engaging with them, you're kind of giving them the foothold to get that started and the potential to amplify it from there. And you certainly don't want to get kind of drugged down in the comments, engaging with somebody who's acting in bad faith. So in these cases, monitor, and you may notify the PR team or any sort of customer service team to kind of also help in monitoring that situation in case it gets a little out of control. Someone that's misguided, a lot of times they may be mistaken or misunderstood something in your original post. And in these cases, it's perfectly fine to reply and fix the facts. You can provide that objective, non-emotional information, kind of clarifying what it is you meant to convey in the first place. You may also run into unhappy constituents. They may have had a negative experience with your brand. They may have had an issue if there's some sort of product. But in these cases, you want to reply to them with intent to improve the situation. And then you want to route to the appropriate team. And the most important thing here is you really want to take that conversation offline. someone who has something that maybe warrants rectifying, a quick comment to either direct message you on the channel, or providing them an email or a phone number that they can use to take that conversation offline, so that you're not having that conversation where you're trying to address their needs in the public forum. The hope is that this doesn't turn into a long thread that then you move up the chain here and all of a sudden you have a rager on your hand, for instance. And then the final is custom. Of course, there's tons of different interactions on social media. And so kind of getting to know your audience, you may know that this person is joking about something. And so you can kind of acknowledge that joke. They're not that serious. They post all the time on your page. So leave room for kind of those unique circumstances where you may need an alternate approach. So how do you keep attention? This is kind of the $1 million question on social media. And I'm going to run through a couple of campaign examples that we've developed at Cherry Matthews Group for some of the tech stock campaigns that we help with. So the first here with the motorcycle campaign, I'm going to try. So a lot of these are animated, so I'm going to be switching between the slides and some videos. So just bear with me as I do that. So you can see with these are very bold graphical treatments that we're using. What we kind of call it is thumb stopping imagery. So when you're scrolling on your social feed, like you're on Instagram and you're going through posts, the average post is on your screen for only 1.8 seconds. So when you think about creating your social media posts, you have to think about, in that 1.8 seconds, what's going to cause my audience to stop and actually stay and digest the information that I'm putting out there. Even once you get somebody to stop, you generally only have about 6 seconds of their attention before they move on. So you need to find quick, bold ways to kind of convey that attention or capture their attention immediately so that they stay with you and understand what message you're trying to get across to them. Let's see, switch back to my slides here. So I pulled a few examples. These on the last slide, you can see appeal to a wide audience. They immediately get the message across. It's check your blind spots, because we want people to check their blind spots. Motorcycles are hard to see, and if you saw the little motorcycle kind of goes between the text, and then look twice like the blinker. So all things that catch your attention, and within those first few seconds, you've kind of communicated your message. But you can get a little bit more long form than that. You can kind of use narrative in a simple way or in a more involved way to keep the audience's attention. So for the Click It or Ticket campaign, this is kind of the next level. It starts off with a quote from somebody, kind of excusing not wearing a seatbelt. And it says, "I'm not going very far." And then it cuts in with the seat belt buckling and says, "Excuses won't save you from a crash or a ticket." So again, the same kind of simple, bold approach that someone can see quickly and digest that information, get the message across up front. And it appeals to a very broad audience. When you're doing things like using hashtags to get in front of as many people as possible, you want something that a lot of people can relate to, and these simple graphical treatments do that. This next one is actually a video, and unfortunately I don't have the video today, but I'll kind of walk you through it. This is for the impaired driving campaign and talks about the cost of a DWI. And this is a Labor Day message, so still kind of relevant here. But it starts off just pricing out different objects you might use during your Labor Day barbecue celebration. And then as you follow that and you see these scenes of people having fun, it ends with a DWI could cost you up to $17,000. So in this approach, you know, we use some of these other techniques, these bold graphical treatments up front to try and capture people's attention, you know, within that first 2 to 3 seconds that they're seeing this ad. And then hopefully they want to follow that through all the way to the end to see what the payoff is. It's still, this ad is only about 15, 20 seconds long. So still not an intense kind of investment of time to follow this when you're scrolling through your feed. Then the next step up are going to be some of our longer form videos here. Influencers. So with the Talk Text Crash campaign, we employed a number of influencers to really try and get to that younger audience that we're trying to talk to. You know, this audience is, I mean, they're definitely younger. They also, more than some of these other campaigns that we were just looking at, skew a little bit more female. And for this reason, we decided to go with influencers. One of the reasons being that influencers are really trusted by this audience. There's actually a 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer study where they measure, you know, what mediums and messages do audiences find the most trustworthy. And for those under the age of 35, they ranked influencers as having the most trust and value. So it's a place online that they turn to really kind of form their opinions. A lot of these people, influencers, have very devout followings, and they like their messages, and so they're willing to spend that extra maybe minute. I talked about some TikToks being as long as 10 minutes. But if you know you like this person, you like their content, you kind of have this parasocial relationship with them, you're going to stick around for the full message and really interact with that content. And that's what we've seen. Our influencer campaigns are some of the most successful that we run and often outperform the media campaigns, like the paid social posts that you might see in your feed. And this isn't just us. Edelman, the same group, did a survey of marketers and found that nearly 60% of marketers that they surveyed had the same results, that their influencer campaigns are really effective in getting their messages across. So I'm going to play a couple of these for you. We'll start with Monica here over on the left.
Always want to put on your seatbelt. Oh, yeah. Oh. Hey, what are you doing? Number one rule is to never, and I mean never, text while driving. I don't care if it's your dad texting you, your sister, your crush. Actually, never answer him. I know, Ma. Hey, I'll just text you. Give me that. Hey, Tony, never text my daughter while driving. It's not Tony. Hey, Michael, never text my daughter while driving. It's not Michael either. Hey, whatever. Whoever this is, text her never. I mean later. Don't you know it's illegal to be texting while driving? Goodbye, Tony. Send. Mama. If I'm going to teach you how to drive, we're going to start off with all the safety precautions, and that's including no texting while driving, eh? If not, you can walk yourself everywhere. I don't care.
So you can see influencers can kind of insert some humor into it. They have a big personality where they can kind of take what can be sometimes viewed as a very preachy, stilted message and kind of make it fun and relatable to the audience that they're talking to. This one, Mary Bennett here, took a little bit of a different approach. Her account is dedicated to outlining fun things to do in the Dallas area. And so I'll show you how she tied that into the campaign.
And that means date night in the Bennett house. And I'm so excited to share some date night ideas. But safety first, be sure to buckle up your seatbelt before driving and also give your full attention to driving. So put your phone down. Texting while driving is illegal and very dangerous. Hubby and I recently discovered the perfect place to unwind and have a great dinner near the water at Boardwalk at Granite Park. It's such a cool area with casual eateries and bars with outdoor seating on a waterside boardwalk. We were in the mood for Mexican, so we decided to try Blue Mesa, and I always have to try Babe's food before mine. Now that our bellies are full, it's time to head to the next place, but before driving, remember to put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Also, pull off to the side of the road entirely and come to a complete stop before you text or talk. Now, if you're looking for something fun and exciting to do for date night, I'd highly recommend Evo Entertainment. There are so many things to do, from arcade games, we played Hungry Hippo, bumper cars, which was so nostalgic for me. We had so much fun hanging out and being kids again. Remember to buckle up when you try these places because nobody wants to ruin the night with a ticket.
Yeah, so you can see kind of the different approach taken here. Since she's very focused on giving you fun things to do in Dallas, she was able to integrate our message of not texting and driving into some of her usual content. And by kind of giving the message up front, we make sure that we deliver the message. And then she gives you one of her fun places to go. And then she interjects a little bit more with the message before again delivering another fun tip of a date night activity. And so in this way, you're kind of keeping the audience engaged throughout. They don't see that it's this, preachy message and skip that video. They want to get to their fun place to go and their tip from an influencer that they trust and follow. And so we're able to deliver those messages kind of in between. This last video is a little bit different and was actually one of our most successful posts of this campaign. This is Jay the Rap Specialist. He's based in Houston and he does car raps. So we're on topic with the kind of driving car enthusiast audience here. And you'll see it's kind of an ASMR experience if you're familiar with that. And then he interjects with the message of the campaign.
Department of Transportation saw my rap videos. They asked for a really cool rap. Quick reminder.
We love to customize our vehicles, but one thing you shouldn't forget is to always stay safe while driving.
First things first, always make sure to buckle up your seatbelt.
Make sure to turn off your phone, put it away, or you can also use an app that will block text messages and calls while you're driving. Be sure to let your family and friends know that you won't be responding to any text messages or calls while driving. If you must make a phone call or send a text message, make sure you pull off the road entirely, come to a complete stop, and then you can respond. Don't forget that texting while driving is dangerous and illegal.
The Texas.
Yeah. So you can see he kind of starts with what people are used to seeing on his page. And it is kind of this zen kind of watch him wrap a car experience. And then people stayed for the message about not texting and driving. When we run these campaigns, we can see completion rate of videos. And despite him kind of chunking things at the back end, the audience really pays attention to his information and they stayed all the way through the end. All right, so just to kind of summarize some of those creative techniques there and add a few pointers, you want to be able to deliver that message immediately. 47% of ad recall occurs in the first 3 seconds of a video. You want to make sure that it's formatted for mobile. Video is a good technique to use. Often you want to design for a sound off environment. You'll notice in a lot of those videos, we'll add captions. So even if someone is, the whole point is them talking, someone can follow along if the sound is off, and then play with what's possible. There's lots of interactive ways you can use social media, but then there's also stuff like partnering with influencers that may be a good approach to take. And so finally, I'm going to conclude this with tips and tricks section. How do you actually execute on a lot of these things? Like what are the tools that you need to use? And I know that we only have about 10 minutes left here, and I want to leave some time for Q&A, so I'll probably go through these pretty quickly. But I've included here the best times to post. These are platform wide. So as you post and get to know your audience, you may find that your times differ for your specific channel that you're managing. But these at least give you a good guidance and a good starting point, and kind of reveal, certain truths about social media. People generally use social media kind of in the middle of the week. Unfortunately, it's when probably the work day and they have a lunch break and they log on. You'll notice that the weekends are not quite as popular for social media. And this holds true whether you're talking about Facebook or Instagram. You can see that kind of midweek, midday spike in activity. And then for Twitter, still midweek, but you'll notice that the peak times are actually in the morning, which probably coincides with its use as kind of a news platform. People are probably on their way to work and are checking Twitter for the news of the day. Some tools to help you create all of these fun posts. There's a free-to-use tool called Canva. Some of you may be familiar. It's very popular, but it offers a lot of great templates for you to put together images or quick little animations, kind of like I was showing with the bold graphical approach. They also include a lot of stock images that you can pull in, so you may not have a lot of photography to work with, and this gives you kind of that starting point to develop your content. But it's a great tool to kind of add that visual pizzazz to your social media posts. Display purposes is also a great tool that I use often. We talked a lot about hashtags and how those can help boost the reach of your posts. And this is a hashtag generator. So you can type in a few ideas here and it'll pull in similar hashtags. And then you can see here in the screenshot, there's actually a copy mode that will allow you to copy those hashtags and add those dots that I was talking about to plug into your post. So you don't have to kind of manually do the period space. Also, if you're managing a lot of posts, it's kind of a chore to log in all the day, maybe midday, at lunch, and post. So you probably want to use a social media management platform. Hootsuite is one of the more popular ones and is also free to use to get started. And it allows you to batch your posts. So you can work to load up all your posts for that week. Maybe you're really on top of it and you load up your posts for the month in this platform. But that way you can kind of set it and forget it to a certain extent. What I like to do is set everything up to post, and then with the time I save later in the week or month, use that time to actually go into the platform and interact. So, it is social media. And you can use that time to instead comment, reply to people, like things, kind of boost that engagement. And then finally, how do you measure your success? I pulled out 3 stats here. I have kind of a detailed explanation under each of them, but in essence, you want to take a look at the engagement and the awareness that you're generating. Engagement is going to be any sort of interaction with that post. That's the likes, the reactions, comments, shares. Maybe you're able to measure clicks. You're trying to send them to an article or something. You add all those up and that's your engagement. Awareness is going to be impressions or reach. Depends on the platform you're using. Impressions are just how many people viewed the post. Reach is going to be those individual people that viewed the post. And then you can take those 2 metrics, divide that engagement by the awareness, and get your engagement rate. So this is expressed as a percentage. And that way you can kind of get a gauge of what's popular and what area you need to work on. Something with that 20 people see, but got 19 likes, got a ton of engagement rate, has a really high engagement rate. And in that case, you maybe want to work on something like hashtags, or you may want to pay to promote that post to get a little bit more reach because people are clearly liking it. The other side of the coin, if only your mom is liking your social media post, but it's getting in front of 1,000 people, then you might want to work on some of the content, increase the boldness of your graphics, use a tool like Canva to kind of make those thumb-stopping images. So I've kind of alluded to this throughout, but social media, you can feed it as much content or as little content as you'd like, but it really all comes with using this approach where you post something, test it out, kind of learn from that approach, maybe tweak your next post, and then post it again and find out what happens. It all kind of depends on your audience and who you're trying to talk to. So, kind of get to know your audience as you post, and next thing you know, you'll have a viral hit. All right, I know that I've left about 5 minutes for Q&A here. So it looks like there's a few chats and a few things under the Q&A section. This may be from Jeff's presentation, but media slides, will they become available to us? Yeah, I can upload the PDF of this to the handout section like Chris described. When it comes to hashtags, what's the sweet spot for how many to include? How many is too many? That's an interesting question, and it varies by platform. Something like Twitter or TikTok, where you're pretty limited in characters, you're probably only going to want to put 3 to 6 hashtags on there. Instagram is the one where you can really just bomb hashtags, although that's not necessarily the approach that you want to take. I would say on Instagram, if you can get more than 10 that are relevant to you, that's really good. The limit is actually 30. And back a few years ago, you put 30 hashtags in there and you tried to, get as much engagement as possible from those 30 hashtags. Now there's a thought that Instagram actually sees that as a little spammy by putting that many hashtags into your post. And so the sweet spot now is generally like 15 to 20. And one way I like to think about dividing the hashtags are kind of 3 categories. So you're going to have like your probably very niche hashtags. These may be your campaign hashtags, something that's very locally relevant. If you're in a small town, you might tag that small town if the information is relevant to that. Then you have your medium hashtags. In the example I used, the Jeep examples are a pretty good example of that. It's like topical to your post. It may be kind of a smaller community, but it's not just these giant hashtags, which is what your third category is going to be. So if you have 15 hashtags on your post, maybe like 5 of each. The last category being the ones that have those millions and millions of posts behind them. It's a little bit of a game of chance. You're probably really likely to show up in the smallest group. You're probably going to show up in the mid-tier group, and in the big group, you're probably not likely to show up. But if you do, and that post catches on fire, I wish the fire emoji was down there. That could really blow up if it catches in that feed. But the likelihood of that happening is not great, but you want to give it that shot. Don't spread misinformation. Who gets to define what is misinformation? Really, when I'm talking about misinformation, I know a lot of you are probably representing brands or organizations on your social media. And so it's really just going back to what that brand or organization kind of dictates is their facts that they're putting out. I know there are a lot of, this is a kind of a touchy subject, and there are certainly things that are happening on social media around misinformation and new tools that are being deployed to try and solve this issue. But it's a tough one to tackle. And you'll see things like on Twitter, there's now a little call out under articles where you can add context to things. And so kind of as Jeff alluded to, there may be two sides to a story. And so whatever your brand or organization side is what you want to stick to if you're the one in charge of the brand. It looks like in the chat, we have a few comments. Don't see too many questions. If there are any last questions, we may be at time. We may get all booted from the room. But yeah, if that's it, I'll turn it back over to Michael here.
Thank you for being with us today, Jeff and Charlie. That was very informative. Again, I want to remind everybody, don't forget to give us your feedback on the summit by going to the attendee lounge and clicking on the summit evaluation. This brings us to our lunch break. We will reconvene here at 1 p.m. And please be sure to stop by our online expo hall during the break. Enjoy your lunch.